Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Milind Patil, for giving the introduction. Friends, welcome to the first webinar in the series of 19 webinars on the subject of uh, interstate river water disputes in India. And this first webinar is on the subject of constitutional and legal provisions for water resources. Friends, we know that water is the elixir of life. Important that it holds in our life for our livelihood and for our economic development. Water is one of the most important economic development. It is also very crucial for our food security and energy security, and it is essential for the biosystem in which we live. Friends, there is an increasing demand for water from various water use sectors like irrigation, domestic, industry, energy, due to ceaseless rise in population, industrialization, and also the problem is more compounded because of the climatic impact of climatic change. Just a moment, friends. I think issue in this one. Yeah. The demand for water from various end users like irrigation, drinking water, industries, power generation, fisheries is ever increasing because of the ceaseless rise in human population, increase in standard of living, industrialization, as well as agriculture activities. There is a increasing competition for this resource, not only from different nations, but also from various states, within the state from various basins, within the basin from various districts, and within the districts from various users. Competition is posing a threat to the national as well as international security. It is always said that the Third World War will be for water of international rivers. But apart from the, however, contrary to this apprehension, nowadays we see more of interstate conflicts rather than international conflicts. And these interstate conflicts have higher potential for economic and social disruption, and they also pose a threat to national integration. And that is why we need to have proper rules for governing the development and use of this resource, as well as proper mechanism for dispute resolution. From floods, droughts, quality issues, groundwater exploitation, very low water use efficiency, to ecological concerns, and it is further compounded by impact of climate change. In such a scenario, every level of government, whether it is the state government, central government, municipal corporations, gram panchayat, they all need to work for common objectives with appropriate legislative measures as well as executive actions. If you see the current institutional framework that is existing in India, the responsibilities have been divided between the central government as well as state government. At the government Union Ministry of General Policy and Water Resources sector, water resources development as a national resource. It also gives technical and financial assistance to states for irrigation, flood control, safe and adequate drinking water to rural India, groundwater exploration, command area development, drainage, sea erosion, as well as dam safety, etc. It plays a very important role for resolution of interstate water disputes, and it also has a role to play for regulation and development of interstate rivers. Even at the central level, the various aspects of water resources are handled by different water resources, different central ministries. Which treatment is looked after by Urban Development Ministry. Hydropower is the subject matter of Ministry of Power. Pollution control and environmental issues are looked after by the Ministry of Environment and Forest. Watershed development is looked after by Rural Development Ministry, whereas irrigation practices or use of water for irrigation is the subject matter of Ministry of Agriculture. But it is the state government which has to play a role of which has to play a primary role, basically because water is a state subject. What do you mean by water is a state subject? We will come to that a little later. But state government has a preeminence in governing the water resources and has a primary responsibility for use and control of this resource. At the state level, we have various ministries and departments. Water resources departments of the state governments handle medium and major irrigation. Minor irrigation is handled by a separate department specifically constituted for the purpose, and there it is also looked after by the municipal by the gram panchayats or the Jilla Parishads. Hydropower is looked after by the electricity boards. There are specific organizations for handling groundwater development and regulation. Urban water supply is looked after by the municipal corporations, whereas panchayats takes care of the rural water supply. So at state level also, there are different organizations taking care of various responsibilities to pertaining to water. For development of any sector, it is based on three pillars: legal framework, institutional mechanism, and the policy framework. Obviously, the legal framework is the supreme because institutions and policies both operate within the boundaries defined by the legal framework. The policies are framed, and the policies and the legal responsibilities are discharged by various institutions. To understand the water governance in India and responsibility and role of respective governments, one must understand the fundamental provisions regarding water in our constitution, because our constitution is our fundamental law. Every government has to function within the boundaries given in the constitution. All laws passed by central state legislatures as well as subordinate legislation have to conform to the constitutional provisions. Whichever legislation or part of it falls out of the ambit of the constitutional provision, it becomes unconstitutional and hence can be declared as illegal and inoperative. So we'll start having a look at the constitutional provisions pertaining to the water. The provisions that we see today in our constitution, they have not appeared instantly at the time of framing of the constitution, but it has a long history. Laws related to water in India have diverse origins, starting from ancient traditions to local customs to British common law. But historically speaking, two important colonial legislations, that is Government of India Act 1919 and Government of India Act 1935, they are the two important legislations which prepared the which eventually shaped the constitutional provisions relating to water. If you see the history of water law in India, it can be divided in 4 stages. Obviously, before 1921, that is before the enactment of Government of India Act 1999, everything was in the hand of British government. All decisions in the water sector were taken for the benefit of the Britishers. In 1919, with the Government of India Act, which was implemented from 1921, diarchy was introduced in the provincial governments and some autonomy was given to the provincial governments. So from 1921 to 1937, that is the period when the diarchy was operational, some freedom was there to the provincial governments. However, this freedom was not available in respect of irrigation, because irrigation as a subject was retained by the Britishers as a reserved subject, unlike hydropower, which was transferred to the provincial governments as a transferred subject. Until 1921, irrigation as well as hydropower was under the authority of Government of India. They exercised all the powers. But after 1921, irrigation became provincial subject, but it was reserved. The rigid control exercised by the Secretary of State and the Government of India was relaxed. The expenditure on irrigation development was not voted by the provincial legislature. prior approval of the Secretary of State for project costing more than 5 million rupees or project with interprovincial implications was needed. However, unlike irrigation, hydroelectric development became a transferred subject in 1921. The next major shift came when Government of India Act 1935 was implemented in 1937. This act had a three list. List 1 was the federal list, list 2 was the provincial list, and list 3 was the concurrent list. The item number 19 of this list 2 to say water supplies, irrigation canals, drainage, and embankments, water storage, and water power. That means with this provision, water became a state. At the time, it was a provincial government. So with this provision, water become provincial subject. As you might be knowing that Constitution of India has largely been adopted from Government of India Act 1935, and the three lists given in the Government of Act 1935 continued in our Constitution with some modifications and additions. So with this provision, the exclusive powers was given to provinces to control did any relating to hydroelectricity. With provincial autonomy, irrigation became transferred subject, and the provincial governments got full powers over irrigation work development. But even in Government of India Act 1935, they could foresee that there can be issues between different provinces as far as sharing of waters is concerned. And in this act, the Governor General was empowered to give a decision in the matters of interprovincial or state water disputes referred to it. So as per this act, Governor General was empowered. There were provision by which the Governor General would constitute a commission which will do the investigation and will advise the Governor General, and the Governor General will give the final decision. That was the provision in Government of India Act 1935. When our Constitution was being written, the Constituent Assembly, the same provision was maintained in the draft Constitution, except that instead of Governor General, the President was given the powers. However, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar modified this provision, and he was instrumental in changing the draft provision, whereby the power to create a mechanism for resolution of state water disputes, interstate water disputes, was given to the Parliament rather than to the President of India. So if we see the development of water law over a period of time, we can clearly see four stages. Before 1921, when central government had full power, 21 to 37, when it was provincial list subject, but it was reserved list. Whereas if you compare it with the hydropower legislation, hydropower became a transferred subject in 1921 itself. From 37 to 50, water was made as a state subject and full autonomy was given to the state government. Same thing happened for the hydropower also. However, after 1950, that is the period when we adopted our new constitution, the earlier provision continued. However, there was a rider given in terms of entry number 56, which was inserted in the union list. This entry number 56 empowers Parliament for enacting laws in respect of interstate rivers. However, in respect of hydropower, it was included in the state list. It continued in the state list. However, it was also included in the concurrent list as electricity. So it is interesting to see how the water law developed and how the hydropower law developed. Now, if you come to the specific provisions pertaining to the water in our constitution, there is a Article 263. Basically, the founding fathers could visualize, could anticipate that there will be issues between center and states, among states, or between center and few states and other states. So, Article 263 was inserted in the Constitution for coordination between the states and for establishment of interstate council, and the power to establish the interstate council was given to the President of India. Accordingly, in accordance with this Article 263, President established interstate council in 1990. However, our founding fathers could still further visualize that there is a one area which could have a serious implications for the socio-economic development as well as national integrity, and that is the interstate rivers. And that is why a special Article 262 was inserted for dealing with interstate disputes and for development of interstate rivers and river valleys. Now, because special provision overrides the general provision, therefore Article 262 is important for resolution of interstate river water disputes. So what is this article? What is this Article 262? This article provides for adjudication of related water of interstate rivers and river valleys. So the article reads, Parliament may by law provide for the adjudication of any dispute or complaint with respect to the use, distribution or control of the waters of or in any interstate rivers or river valleys. So the power for creating a mechanism for resolution of interstate dispute has been given to the Parliament, which it can exercise by enacting a law. So enacting of law is very important because that is the mechanism by which Parliament can exercise its authority or its power to resolve the. It also has one more important clause which reads that notwithstanding anything in the Constitution, Parliament may by law provide that neither the state court nor any other court shall exercise jurisdiction in respect of any such dispute or complaint as is referred in clause 1. Now, this is something very unusual because this clause has a potential of creating an exception for Supreme Court, which otherwise is the highest adjudicatory body for any dispute between center and states as per the Article 131 of the Constitution. So why our founding fathers thought it fit that we should make a provision for debarment of Supreme Court in having any jurisdiction in respect of interstate water dispute. Now we'll get into the details of this aspect later, but let us first try to understand what are the important entries in the Parliament in the Constitution. So we saw Article 262. Then the next entry in the next provision in the Constitution is entry number 56, given in the list 1 of Schedule 7. This entry number 56 reads that regulation and development of interstate rivers and river valleys, to the extent to which such regulation and development under the control of the Union is declared by Parliament by law to be expedient in the public interest. Now, this big clause which authorizes Parliament to take over or which allows the Parliament to enact laws by which we can have a regulation and development of these interstate rivers under the control of Union, that is the central government, provided that it is done in the expedient, it is done in the public interest. So many times there is a talk that we should bring water in as a concurrent subject, but if you have a close look at this particular entry, you will find that Parliament has quite a big power for enacting laws in respect of interstate rivers, basically because all our major river basins and all our most of our medium river basins are interstate. Almost 78 to 80% of area of India is covered by interstate rivers, and that's why any act passed for these interstate rivers will be applicable to it. Next important provision in the Constitution is entry number 17 of list 2, that is a state list given in the Schedule 7. It says water, that is to say water supplies, irrigation and canals, drainage and embankment, water storage, water power, subject to provisions of entry number 56 of list 1. Now, if you see the first two lines of this clause, they are as it is taken from the Government of India Act 1935, but a rider has been added subject to the provisions of entry number 56 of the list 1. Yes, because of this entry, we always say that water is a state subject because it gives exclusive power to the water resources of a state for its control, for its governor, for enacting any laws. Okay, but subjected to the provision of 56 by which Parliament can enact laws for interstate rivers. Article 262, Parliament enacted a law in 1956, and that law is called Interstate River Water Dispute Act. This law was for adjudication of disputes involving the issues of use, distribution, and control of interstate water rivers. And it also provided for the exclusion of the jurisdiction of all courts, including the Supreme Court. Because Article 262 says that Parliament by law can jurisdiction of Supreme Court. So this Interstate River Water Dispute Act of 1956 has a provision for debarment of Supreme Court. Now, why our founding fathers thought it fit that we should debar Supreme Court, whereas this is the apex court of the land and has a jurisdiction adjudicatory powers for all the disputes between center and states or among the states also, as given in Article 131. Basically, it follows because of the historical reasons also. That means this particular provision that the Supreme Court will not have jurisdiction has not come in the Constitution of there in the Government of India Act 1935. Okay. Secondly, water being a social good, water being a rather a political good also. It is a political decision. Basically, political decisions govern the distribution, use, and allocation of this precious resource. Secondly, there are no clear-cut rules for the allocation and use. The allocation to different water users depends upon so many factors. Normally, a judicial process given rules, but for water distribution, there are no rules. There are many factors that are involved. Moreover, water is a dynamic resource. It is always in motion, movement. It's not a static resource. And the factors that decide the distribution of water, like geographical area, hydrology, contribution by each state, number of population, current use, the use which is already established, future use, current level of development, socio-economic level of the users, what are going to be the future requirement, so on and so forth. So all these factors are even not steady, they are dynamic in nature. And that's why a judicial allocation is problematic. Moreover, the time taken for legal cases is very long, and because of this, the use of this interstate river waters may get delayed, and it will again have an impact on the socio-economic development of that region. And because of all these factors, the founding fathers thought it fit that we should have a full authority to the Parliament to take decision in this matter. And it is not that only India is having this provision. In other nations also, the distribution of water among various states is up to some extent done without the judicial process. In this respect, a comment by the Supreme Court of USA is very pertinent. If you read this comment, it says that the reason for judicial caution in adjudicating the relative rights of the states in such cases is that while we have jurisdiction over such disputes, They involve the interest of quasi-sovereign, present complicated and delicate questions, and due to possibility of future changes of conditions, necessitate expert administration rather than judicial imposition of a hard and fast rule. We say of this case, as the court had said of interstate differences of the like nature, that such mutual accommodation and agreement should, if possible, be the medium of settlement instead of invocation of our adjudicatory power. So even in the other countries also, the judiciary does not have a sufficient basis or expertise, or because of the complicated nature of the water sector, it's not very easy to do the allocation of water among different states and resolve these water disputes. As I said, in India, almost all major river basins, as well as many medium river basins, are interstate, and that's why this particular act is very important for dispute resolutions which are arising in India. As Chairman Sir told in an inaugural address, we are seeing more and more disputes coming up for different river basins. This act empowers Government of India for constitution of water dispute tribunal. Whenever it receives a complaint from the state government, the tribunal has to be constituted within 1 year. It consists of chairman and 2 other members nominated by Chief Justice of India. Government of India may appoint 2 or more persons as assessors in the consultation with tribunal, and the tribunal has same powers as civil court. So if you see the act that has been passed by Parliament, you will find that Parliament has again taken the recourse of a judicial process only by giving the powers of a civil court to the tribunal. All these details regarding the act will be covered in tomorrow's in the next webinar, but I'm just touching it to highlight the various issues pertaining to interstate water dispute. Under this act, various tribunals were constituted till date. To be precise, 9 tribunals have been constituted, starting from Krishna in April 1969, Godavari, Narmada, Ravi and Bias, Kaveri, again Krishna, because as I said, even the award given by the tribunal is not forever. It has certain validity, 40 years, 45 years, as given in the tribunal award. Basically because the award is based on certain parameters, and these parameters are again dynamic. So whatever decision taken today, the parameters may change tomorrow, and that's why having a permanent award is not advised, and tribunal themselves in their award indicate the validity of the award decision. This is the map which shows the constitution of tribunal for various river basins and the date of their award. This act, which was passed in 1956, has been amended from time to time to take into account certain issues. It was amended in 57, 68, 80, 86, and 2002. However, these modifications or the amendments were to take care of certain specific issues. Like in 1980, it was amended to accommodate the directions of Narmada Water Dispute Tribunal, and a section was added which provided for the framing of a scheme to give the effect to the tribunal's award. Then there was some specific case of Ravi Bias Water Tribunal, for which amendment was done in 1986. It was further amended in 2002 as a follow-up of recommendations of the Sarkaria Commission. Now, even though the act is very clear that the jurisdiction of Supreme Court has been debarred, but in spite of this, the state approaches Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court also admits the special leave petitions, because as you all are aware, almost every decision of the tribunal is challenged by the party state in Supreme Court, and then again the judicial process starts, and it takes further time to get the final decision of the Supreme Court. So now the Constitution gives a provision whereby the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court is debarred, but then there is a Article 131 which is used by the states to file the SLPs in the Supreme Court. So on one hand, we have a one Constitution which says Supreme Court is to be debarred, while on the other hand, we have another provision in the Constitution which says that Supreme Court will have a jurisdiction as an appellate authority for any decision given by any court, tribunal, or any other judiciary body across India, and that is Article 131. So, though there seems to be some contradiction, it has been now well settled that Supreme Court exercises its appellate authority given to it under 131, and it gives the final decision on the award of the tribunal. Sometimes even center also goes to the Supreme Court to seek guidance under Article 143. It is interesting to see what is this Article 131, which gives the original jurisdiction to the Supreme Court. It says that subject to the provisions of the Constitution, the Supreme Court shall, to the exclusion of any other court, have original jurisdiction in any dispute between Government of India and one or more state, between Government of India and any state or states, or between two or more states. But the article which is used mostly by the state governments to approach SC is Article 136, which gives appellate authority to Supreme Court against any appeal, against any judgment, decree, determination, or sentence or order passed by any court or tribunal in India. Article 143 is used by the central government many times to approach the Supreme Court whenever it needs certain clarifications or certain opinion of the Supreme Court. I will tell you the examples. In respect of Kaveri Water Dispute Tribunal, when Karnataka Assembly passed an act to nullify the effect of interim order of the tribunal, President of India made a reference to Supreme Court under Article 143, and as per that, as per the advice of the Supreme Court, the act was found to be unconstitutional. In the same tribunal award case, the party states filed SLPs under Article 136. In Krishna Water Dispute Tribunal also, the state governments resorted to Article 136 to file SLPs for challenging the order of the tribunal. In Ravi Vyas case, Article 131 was used by Government of Punjab to file a suit in Supreme Court to seek the discharge from obligation under Supreme Court order dated.
Next वाला है इसमें देखिए एक
in this case presidential reference was also made under Article 143. If you see the latest tribunal awards given by Mahadayi Water Dispute Tribunal, here again all party states, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Goa, they have filed SLPs under 136, and Supreme Court has admitted it. So, in spite of debarment of Supreme Court, it is admitting SLPs as appellate authority, and the observations of SC in this case are very important to understand. The Supreme Court says that even though Section 11 of the 1956 Act has the jurisdiction of the court, and it is to say that it is in connoissance with the language employed in the Article 262 of the Constitution, the founding fathers had not conferred the power of this court to entertain an original suit of complaint. That means the Supreme Court is accepting that it is not the, it does not have the jurisdiction of the original, admitting original complaint from the state in respect of interstate dispute, but
तुम्हारे पास 30 लाख पड़ा है, लेकिन तुम 33 लाख ट्रांसफर करना चाहते हो, बाकी 6 लाख रखना चाहते हो,
decision of the tribunal is challenged in Supreme Court. So these are the observations.
बाकी 6 लाख क्या करोगे?
So finally, it is well established that the Supreme Court is exercising appellate jurisdiction
Total amount
also
has
in
to
the
be
realm of
transferred. यार
interstate
उसमें
water
रख के क्या फायदा बताओ?
Act.
सर वो जलमथन का पैसा ना हो सकता है मिनिस्ट्री को वो पैसा सरेंडर करना पड़ेगा डायरेक्टली तो कोई बाकी पैसा तो
So
हमारे
we saw the effect of Article 262 and the Interstate River Water Dispute Act, which was
ठीक है, अभी 3396 पर
enacted based on that Article 262. Now coming to the entry number 56, which gives power to the Parliament for passing laws for regulation and development of interstate rivers. Has Parliament passed any laws? Yes. Parliament has passed a River Board Act 1956 in pursuance of this entry number 56.
18-19 में भी पॉइंट किया था वो 18-19 में है अच्छा they have been वो हर
Please
बार
kindly mute yourself.
Kindly mute your phones.
फोन म्यूट कीजिए प्लीज.
Authority to
चास्कर जी ये कोई मंजीत है, मंजीत जिनका माइक म्यूट नहीं है. मंजीत अपना माइक म्यूट कीजिए प्लीज. मंजीत.
That is why up till now there is no case, or up till now there is no board which has been constituted using this particular act. So there are new legislation in our country, and many of them are only on the statute book without any operation. So the River Board Act 1956 is one such act which has not yet been used for establishment of any board. So it is a very high time to put it into action, or it is not, if or it is needed to be strengthened to make it more effective. And in fact, central government is now trying to has come up with a new bill that is called River Basin Management Bill, which is which will remove the deficiencies of this particular act. Now you might be that there are many river bodies working in the river boards working in India, like Damodar Valley Corporation, Betwa River Board, Brahmaputra Board. However, all these boards, none of them have been constituted under the River Board Act 1956. They have been constituted under separate act. They are offshoots of various interstate agreements. They are also constituted under various resolutions and notifications from the central government. For example, Tungabhadra Board is established through a notification under Andhra State Act 1953. Narmada Control Authority is constituted under the Section 6A of the Interstate Water Dispute Act 1956 to give effect to the decision of Narmada Water Dispute Tribunal. Brahmaputra Board is constituted under Brahmaputra Board Act 1980. Similarly, Yamuna River Board is an offshoot of MOU signed between the Yamuna Basin states. Very recently, we have a Kaveri Water Management Authority, which is constituted in pursuance of Honorable Supreme Court direction given in February 2018, so on and so forth. Now coming to the third important provision of Constitution, which gives the full powers to the state for enacting laws with respect to water or for water resources which are fully in the within the boundaries of the state government, within the state. That is entry number 17. And in pursuance of this entry number 17, numerous laws has been passed by different legislatures. They are known as a Participatory Irrigation Management Act, Water Resources Regulatory Authority Act, so on and so forth. So more than 300 acts are in existence today, passed by different state legislatures. There is one more entry in list 1 that is called entry number 97, which gives authority to the Parliament for passing laws in respect of any topics which are not given in list 1, 2, or 3. So in a very recent case, the dam safety bill, which has already been passed by Lok Sabha, is being processed using the authority of this entry, because dam safety as such is not a subject given in any of the list, and that is why the residuary power offered by entry number 97 is being used. Apart from these 3 or 4 important entries in the Constitution, there are many other provisions which are pertaining to water sector, which are pertaining to water. One of the most important is fundamental rights. Article 21 of the Constitution guarantees fundamental right to life and personal liberty, but there is no specific right for potable drinking water. However, in the last few decades, there have been numerous cases in Supreme Court, and now the case law has been established that yes, right of potable drinking water is inherent into the right of life and personal liberty, and that is why it is a fundamental right. So even though it is not explicitly written in the Constitution, the right to potable drinking water is now a fundamental right laws by the Supreme Court. Similarly, Article 14 requires non-discrimination and absence of arbitrariness in the matter of access to water. So Article 14 gives equal access to water for all citizens. Article 15(2)(b) prohibits the state of any discrimination on the ground of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, etc. So this applies the non-discrimination in terms of use of wells, tanks, bathing ghats, maintained wholly or partially out of the state funds or dedicated to the use of general public. Directive principles of state policies, which are given in Article 39(b), directs the states to adopt policies with a view to secure the ownership and control of the material resources of the community, so distributed as best to subserve the common good. Not only there are rights, but there are duties also. One of the fundamental duty that every citizen is having is given in Article 51A. Clause G reads that to protect and improve the natural environment, including forest, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compassion for all living creatures. So it is a fundamental duty of every citizen to protect and improve the natural environment like lakes and rivers. In concurrent list, there are certain atoms which do not have explicit water connection or explicit mention of water, but they are connected to the water, like adulteration of foodstuff and other goods, economic and social planning, price control. Price control means it will include price of water also, electricity, which includes hydroelectricity, acquisition and requisition of property, so on and so forth. 11th schedule gives the powers to we have a Panchayati Raj and the 3 levels of Panchayat, that is Gram Panchayat, Block and Jila Parishad. And the powers of these Panchayati Raj institutions are given in Article 243G, wherein minor irrigation, water management and watershed development, drinking water, roads, culverts, bridges, ferries, waterways and other means of communication, and maintenance of community assets are within the purview of Panchayats. Whereas water supply for domestic, industrial and commercial purpose is within the purview of municipal corporation as per the Article 243 of the 12th schedule. In addition to this, Parliament still can legislate on matters given in the state list by using Article 249 if the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution by majority of not less than 2/3 of the members present and voting, or under Article 250 during the proclamation of emergency. But as of now, as of today, there is no law which is passed by the Parliament in respect of water using these provisions. However, there are other provisions which are being used to pass the laws on subjects which are otherwise within the jurisdiction of states. And these provisions are Article 252, which basically requires that if two or more state legislatures passes a resolution that on a particular subject, Parliament should enact a law, then Parliament is empowered to enact a law in that case. And then other states can join or that particular enactment by passing similar resolution in their state legislatures. So this Article 252 is a provision which is frequently used to pass the laws in respect of subjects which are otherwise within the purview of state government. 3, which authorizes Parliament to pass laws to give effect to international agreements. And next is Article 356, which is invoked in case of emergency breakdown. In addition, Centre can exercise control over state legislation through Article 200 and Article 288, wherein the state enactment doesn't become law unless it is passed or it is agreed to by the President. There is Article 257 also, which authorizes Centre to give direction to the states. Now, if you see certain laws which have been passed by the Parliament, which are connected with water, we have our Interstate River Water Dispute Act that we saw, which is under Article 262, River Board Act, which is entry number 56. There is a very important legislation called Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974, and there is a further act of 1977. This act was passed under Article 252. So basically, two state legislatures passed a resolution, gave the power to the Parliament. Parliament enacted this law, and then this law was subsequently adopted by other states. And by 1990, every state is now within the purview of this law. One more important piece of legislation, that is Environmental Protection Law 1986, which was enacted by the Parliament, is under Article 253, that is for giving the effect to the international agreement. And there is one more act, which is a British era act, Indian Easement Act 1982, which is still valid because of the Article 372, which allows continuation of existing laws and their adaptation after the independence. So this Water Prevention and Control Pollution Act, which is passed under Article 252, basically provides for creation of central and state pollution control boards, and it is applicable to all states now because they have adopted it by 1990. This is an interesting case of Environmental Protection Act because this act is passed using the provision of Article 253, that is for giving effect to the international agreement. Now, which is the international agreement that is used for enacting this law? This act was passed in the wake of Bhopal caste tragedy, which saw thousands of deaths, and it was then implemented to give effect to the Stockholm Declaration of United Nations Conference on Human Environment, to which India is a signatory. And this act covers different facets of environment, including water, as well as water interrelated, as well as atoms interrelated to water. In exercise of the powers conferred by this act, the central government has constituted an authority known as Water Quality Assessment Authority, WQAA, and Central Groundwater Authority, CGWA. These two authorities are based on this act. In India, we have a very little groundwater regulation. The one regulation that is basically Central Groundwater Authority, based on the Environmental Act, and the other is Indian Easement Act 1982, which is continued from the British era. As per the provision of this act, the land and water are basically treated as together. So when somebody sells land, it is tantamount to selling the water resources associated with that land, surface water as well as groundwater. So it states that the right of every owner of land to collect and dispose within its own limits of all water under the land which does not pass in a defined channel, and all water on its surface which does not pass in a defined channel. So basically it says that if the water is collected on the surface of the land, it belongs to the landowner, or it is collected underground, it belongs to the landowner. But if it is passing in a defined channel, overground as well as underground, it doesn't belong to that particular person. So for surface water, it is very easy to make out that whether it is passing in a channel or not. But it is very difficult to make out whether the groundwater is passing in a definite channel or not. And that's why application of this particular act to regulate the groundwater extraction is problematic. And groundwater is extracted by the landowners as much as they want. It has been well understood that the current level of legal framework is insufficient to cater to the needs of water sector governance and facing the challenges that are faced by the water sector today. So central government, government of India, is coming up with few initiatives, a few legal initiatives. These legal initiatives will be covered in minute details in next webinar. But today I will just touch upon it and indicate the respective constitutional provisions which are being used to enact these bills. So one initiative is National Water Framework Bill. National Water Policy 2012 emphasizes the need to evaluate National Water Framework Law, which should act as an umbrella statement of general principles governing the exercise of legislative as well as executive powers by the center, state, and local governing bodies. And this bill aims towards legislative reforms for sustainable management of water resources. Basically, the idea is to have a common set of principles for governing of water. Obviously, this bill will try to encroach upon the authority of the state government, because it's going to cover the every gamut of water sector. And that is why passing of this bill by the parliament will require some kind of consensus or distinct from the state, consent from the state. Article 252 is the appropriate article to pass this bill, provided at least two states will have to pass a resolution in their respective legislatures and authorize parliament to enact this law, and then other states can join. The other possibility is Article 253, by which, to give effect to international agreement, a parliament can enact law. As per the UN Sustainable Goal number 6, which pertains to clean water and sanitation, this bill process. Goal number 6, clean water and sanitation, does not cover the whole of water sector, and that's probably utilizing this provision of the constitution is also will not be that helpful. River Basin Management Bill 2018 has been formulated by Union Ministry of Jal Shakti. Basically because the River Board Act does not provide for any river basin planning on the principles of IWRM. Integrated water resources management was not really the concept on the minds of the law framers when this particular act was enacted, nor there was a concept of basin planning, because this act does not contain even the word called basin. So now there is, and as we discussed earlier, not a single board has been constituted using this particular provision. So Union Ministry of Jal Shakti has now formulated this new bill, foundation for river basin development and management. And this bill should be easy to pass, basically because It is based on entry number 56, which empowers Parliament to enact laws for interstate rivers. But still, there is a need for consultation with the state government, and the consultation is on. And there are certain reservations being expressed by the state governments, and the consultation is in progress. The next important bill that is being processed is Dam Safety Bill, which provides legal and institutional framework dams. It envisages prevention and mitigation of dam failure related to disasters through proper surveillance, inspection, operation, and maintenance of all dams in the country. As I said earlier, because dam safety is not a subject given either in the entry number 97, as per the residual powers of the Parliament, this bill is being enacted. Lok Sabha has already passed this bill in August 1919, and now it is to be considered by the Rajya Sabha. Groundwater sector is facing a lot of issues in India. A large number of districts are facing, overexploitation of groundwater. Though passing a law by the Parliament will not be within the purview of Parliament to pass the law in this respect. However, state government can pass laws because water is a state subject. So central government is formulating a model bill and putting it in a public domain for state government to follow it or adopt it for passing the respective laws in their state legislatures. The first such model bill was prepared in 1970. It was revised in 72, 96, 2005, 2011. And the current version, that is the model bill 2016, is in the public domain, and the state governments are already been requested by the Union Ministry to adopt this bill in their state legislatures. As in the morning session, inaugural session, Chairman Saab was discussing about the various issues pertaining to the interstate disputes. So the need for single permanent tribunal is being felt for quite some time as number of disputes are increasing, and more strengthening is needed for so accordingly, various amendments being proposed in the Interstate River Dispute Act 1956, and this amendment bill has already been passed by the Lok Sabha in July 2019, and the bill is now for consideration of Rajya Sabha. So friends, these are the overall provisions of provisions in the Constitution for water resources, and we hope that with the legal initiatives being taken by the central government, the legal framework will be more strengthened and will be in a better position to face the challenges of water sector. Thank you so much.